All right, this video is going to talk about installing the rails. The rails are either going to go horizontal, which is most of the time because the roof rafters are already going vertical. So you can see we've installed the feet, marked out where the rafters are, installed the feet. We're going to talk about the Iron Ridge air system, but this video in general applies to virtually all of the different types of racking, but this is certainly one of our favorite ones here in 2025. So to start with, we have the rail, we have the feeder already installed. The initial trick is to use a jig of some sort and set the rail consistently all the way across. And then you want to sight down the rail and to make sure that it's flat all the way across. The roof may not actually be flat, but you want the rail to be flat. So in some cases, you're going to set the nut somewhere in the middle, or it could be somewhere else. You notice here that we've got it set roughly in the middle, which is where you want it. And then once the rails are in, including the splices, so notice that there's a splice here that joins the two segments together. All right, the next step that we want to do is to make the upper rail. So we've got multiple rows. So this is the bottom rail, then this is the top rail of this row of panels, then there's another row of panels up there. The key is we want each row of panels to be flush with each other, or for the lower one to be slightly down so that the snow will slide up so that it won't catch. So the trick to that is to lay a straight edge between the bottom rail of one and then the top and the bottom rail of the next one. And we want to make sure that this top rail is just a little bit lower. It's probably a little more than we really need, but it's can be either flush, which is okay, or slightly down. The only thing is you don't want it to be slightly higher, again, so the snow doesn't catch. Once the rail is on straight and even all the way up and down, the next thing to do is to torque the bolt. Again, usually you want to put the rail on the upper side because that way we're having gravity is pushing down. Whereas if you can put it on the other side, but then the only thing holding it really is the bolt. So you're better off putting the rail on the upper side of the foot, and then that's going to hold down. So the next step again is to use the torque wrench. Make sure that you've figured out exactly what the correct torque is for each system. Every system's a little different. And then torque those all down. Make sure every single one of them is torqued down.
The next step is to measure down each rail the exact measurement of the width of each panel plus the width of the bolt. What you're trying to do is to make sure that you've got the exact location for each panel so that you can mount the inverter in the center of the panel. Typically on the top rail, but it will depend on your particular cable routing needs. You're going to route the Q cable typically in an air system in the channel down the middle, but whatever rail system you're using, you want to make sure that the cables are cinched up nice and tight to the rail itself so that they're not sagging down and touching the asphalt. Any cable ties and things need to make sure that they're not near the edge of a panel. The panel has to sit down on the rail itself.
Again, the key with the panels is we want the top one to be just slightly above the bottom one, but it can be flush, is also perfectly good, but you do want it just slightly above. The key with the first panel is to get it in so that it's absolutely square. Actually, if you look very closely at this particular line, this first panel was a little bit not quite perfectly square. There's a little bit of a line here and a little bit less over there. So we just put a little bit of space. We're going to correct it with this one, and then it'll be straight for the rest of the way down.